I'm a mixing engineer and music producer, and I also make music for TV and advertising. I try to mix as much as I can analog because it's the way I like it. It needs to feel good when you do something. I receive an email in a night and they ask me, how can you do like 4 or 5 hip-hop tracks? And I say, yeah, sure. When do you want them? Oh, in 2 hours.
Hello everybody, today we have another OLLOChat interview with William Robertson. How do you actually do analog mixing? Are you just doing the mixing and then you print it in digital at the end using DAW? Explain a little bit.
There is 2 different type of workflow I've developed. There is the classic analog workflow where you just, you have your session in Pro Tools, for instance. You send it to the desk. You sometimes do a little bit of, corrective EQ, phase alignment in Pro Tools because it's easier. Okay. After you process with the desk and outboard gear or that jazz, you go through the mix bus of the desk, you do processing here, and you print the mix.
All right.
That's all you do. You can also write the automation in Pro Tools, but it's a bit sketchy because it impacts also, how it reacts to the outboard gear. So you can do automation on the fly when you're recording the mix at the end, which is something I do. But this method has issues when you need recall, because everyone's saying when you mix analog, you have problem with recall because if the artist want the hi-hat 1 dB louder, you have to go to the studio again, recall all the outboard, recall all the desk, EQs, compressors, and all that stuff, and it can take hours just for 1 dB on the hi-hat. I do a stereo mix, and I do stems also for safety, but I have another way, which is a lot easier with recall. I have all the tracks on my channel on the desk, and I print every channel, from 1 to 32 or 1 to 24, it depends. And I do mix bus processing and, or parallel mix bus processing, everything you want in the box. So it's 95% in analog. And it's that way I can recall as I want. And if, for instance, the artists say, it doesn't happen that often, even never sometimes, but if the artists say, I don't know, the snare is too compressed or not compressed enough. If it's not compressed enough, put a plugin over it and you compress more. And if it's too compressed, I still have the raw files kept that are muted. In Pro Tools they are hide and inactive. Yeah. So I still have those tracks, and I can try to replicate the sound I did in analog with plugins, but compressing less. Yeah. So that's a way of using analog and still meeting the modern deadlines and all that stuff you need to do, and all the recalls you need to do.
What would be the hybrid workflow? For example, you're now explaining a workflow that requires a mixing console, a mixing desk with at least, 16 channels probably would be kind of the minimum, right? So what would be the hybrid version of it? For example, if you only have 2 or 3 really good channels, maybe from SSL or something like that, can you, pull it off using just 2 channels, or maybe even 1 channel? What would be the workflow to kind of print everything in analog sound and then, use it in the DAW? Is this even possible?
I think it's possible. What I used to do is I used to print every outboard I'm using so I can use them multiple times. If I only have 1 compressor, for instance, I put it on a track, I print it, I still keep the track, without the compressor on it, and I hide it, and I print as much as I can. But also some guys saying that it's better in that case to do outboard on buses, on mix bus, to put the analog flavor over it. Yeah. And I think doing that way, I still have the problem with recall. I still need to recall. Even if it's 1 piece of gear, if, for instance, someone asks me to recall a mix and I'm not at the studio, I'm on the go, which happens quite often, I can't recall the mix, and I'm oh, sorry, I can't recall the mix. You have to wait 1 week or something. Yeah. So it's a bit sketchy, So I prefer to mix, print everything, and so not using on buses, but more on individual tracks.
What would be, your choice of instruments that you would absolutely go analog first, and what would you leave out and just keep it on the digital side of it?
What I noticed when I compare digital stuff and analog stuff is there is some key instruments that need to be perfect is not the word, but I need to be really, really good, really pristine quality or really vibey. And it's, to me, the vocal, the kick and the snare. Or the vocal because, it's the vocal is the king most of the time. And kick and snare, it's because they are the king of the rhythm, king of everything that's related to transients most of the time, of course. And I noticed that plugins are getting better and better, as everyone knows. But in terms of transients, there is still something that needs to be solved or need to be studied a bit more. And sometimes analog gear have a better way to translate transients or to treat transients, or sometimes add a little bit of transient also, which can be weird. And so I prefer to have those transients king, to be processed with analog gear that I know that I can handle very well, and leave, all the points on the bass. It's something really important, but it's not as transient heavy. So you can process it with plugin and having like a really good sound. When I compare analog gear and software on bass, most of the time it was the case where it was the closest.
I've noticed you have a YouTube channel where you did quite some comparisons of the digital version of hardware. How do you actually do these comparisons? What do you actually compare? And if you have maybe a special gear or a VST that is still in your mind and you want to talk a bit about it maybe.
The idea is just to see that if they nailed the vibe and the character of the analog gear or don't. Because sometimes with an EQ you need, so for instance of software, you need to push it a bit more, a bit less to have the same kind of sound. It's all right. It happened also in the analog gear. You need to push a bit more on some EQ to to have the same on left and right channel sometimes. So it's more that I do. And you talk about one software or hardware I still have in mind. And for now, it's more the Summit Audio TLA 100A.
All right.
So this is like a compressor with a tube in the output gain. And it's really a unique piece of gear because it can be quite fast for... it doesn't precise if it's optical compressor. In the manual, they say compressor shell. So it sounds like it's, optical shell from an A to A and all that stuff. But they don't precise it. So it's a bit of a mystery behind this analog gear. And Softtube made a version of this one. And when I compared both, I think it's for now, the closest comparison I've found. Like the difference on bass were bare to none. It was a difference like if you change the tube in a Tele 100A, like it was that close.
The question that pops into mind is, why would you spend like 5 to 10 times more money if you don't really have to? What's the trick?
Analog gear sometimes is hard to justify the price. So especially when it's new. So maybe sometimes buying second hand, it's really a good deal. Even when you compare to plugins, it's really a good deal, even if it's expensive. Analog gear also will never suffer from software, updating, which is not the case of plugin. And recall, you just have to print and you will recall all the time. You don't think about printing all your plugins,
Do you have any recommendations where, an audio engineer can, save a buck or two by going second hand?
It would be first maybe your national website, because for Extensive France we got a really strong national website for selling gear stuff. After you got reverb.com, which is classic. Sometimes you don't have the best deals, but it's a classic place to find something. eBay, but I'm not really into it, to be honest. It's not really my type. I don't like to bidding also on something. And sometimes also it's going around recording studios, because when they get rid of something, sometimes it's for very cheap, because they just want to get rid of it. They don't use it, and it's taking spaces, and it's a pain for them.
What do you have to be really careful about when you're paying, for second-hand gear?
So the power is really something to look at, for sure. What you need to check also is if the power section is fine, because most of the time, if you have also like a sketchy power supply, which you shouldn't, but sometimes happens, if you have a sketchy power supply and the power supply on the unit is a bit old, it can really break everything. So to be honest, when talking about warranty, sometimes it's worth it to have the warranty, but sometimes, I don't say it's the case all the time, but some brands just put a warranty just before the moment they knew the gear will start not working properly. You know, it's a bit sketchy, it happens. And also talking about warranty, it's true that when it's new you got one, but also when you buy second-hand, most of the time if the gear survived, it means that it's maybe good enough. It's a matter of perception. You know, warranty is not the safest stuff you can have. Studio, which is local, it's a lot more trustworthy than if you just buy on eBay and you bid on something that you don't really know the guy. So it's a risk to take, yes.
You can obviously buy second-hand things. What else do you think an audio engineer can do to save some money?
I think the best way to save costs is to don't following the hype too much and trying stuff. And I do that all the time. I try to go to some retailers, ask for the gear to try. It's free most of the time, or they got a deposit that they give you back after. And you try it and you say, no, I don't need it. Or you can try it and say, maybe with plugin I'm close enough, to me. It sounds the same. And you don't buy it and you save money like this.
How do you prepare your price list? What do you charge your clients? How do you charge them?
Not being like super cheap, but just having fair price to everyone, like to every categories of artists or stuff like that. For instance, a big brand is asking me to make a music for like 20 quid. Or like, no way. I mean, you're Coca-Cola, for instance. Don't ask me 20 quid for making a music. It's ridiculous. Don't tell me you don't have the means to, give me some times, hire good musicians, hire an orchestra if you want an orchestra in your advert, who knows. So you have to, but if someone that's like an independent artist is asking me for like a 10-second music for just the trailer or something, maybe I can consider doing something cheaper that I used to do with Coca-Cola, of course. It's something, it's being fair, because it's a really hard industry. Money is hard for everyone. So we need to be fair with what's happening and don't be like, okay, for me it's like 4,000, whatever. I don't care if you just started out. It's 4,000. No, I don't think it's fair.
So you mentioned you work a lot on TV commercials and audio for commercials in general. What is the workflow in this scenario?
It depends if you do like custom music on the video, where you have to follow, the video, or if you're doing music for advertising before and they took it and put in the advertising. And that's a really different workflow, because you don't have as much freedom as if you were doing a psychedelic album with your band. You can't do that too much. You have also to follow the trends a little bit, listening to what's been made and try to follow at least the quality or something. Like, for instance, there was a trend in France to use a lot of vintage rock music for advertising on luxury items or clothing. So you need to follow that. You want to make like a EDM if everyone's doing something different. It's not like in the music when you need to be different. Here you need to be a little bit different. The brand's coming and giving you a marketing brief you have to follow with a lot of adjectives. It needs to be uplifting and all that stuff. So this happens quite a lot. They also give you the length and everything. So it's all set up. Sometimes they give you a reference track also, which is great. But also sometimes you just do music, you send it to a publisher of music libraries. And in that case, you need to also, for instance, printing stems, like bass and drums, without vocals, only with background vocals. You need also to make like 30-second format, 5-second format, 1 minute, full song. Stuff that you don't really do with real music. When you work with TVs and all that stuff, deadlines are really short, like really short. Sometimes I receive an email in a night and they ask me, can you do like 4 or 5 hip-hop tracks And I say, yeah, sure. When do you want them? Oh, in 2 hours. So you need either to do them in 2 hours or to have them already.
So how can you, really pull it off when it comes? So you have a day or 2 days to really make something really cool. How do you pull it off? What do you use to actually make it happen?
A lot of guys are doing, you have templates in your DAW that you can load when, for instance, for hip hop tracks, you have a template where you got good drum machines already set up in your DAW, digital drum machine, and you know that it sounds like this good, and you can put some plugin already before, so you know it sounds good like this. So that definitely helps and saves a lot of time. For drum samples and loops, I've got a folder where I put all the loops I did myself. It can be snares, it can be kicks, it can be also a lot of, effects, when you or stuff like this. Every time I do a new funny noise for transition, I bounce it and I put it in this folder so I can have one back when I need one quick. It saves a lot of time. And after, I never used really loops or samples of, for instance, guitars or bass because I prefer to play it myself. It doesn't take that much time, to be honest. It takes like 2 or 3 minutes to do a 3 or 3 minute songs. I do that in one take most of the time because I have an idea of what I need to do.
Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge, and I hope to do this again someday.